All right, a few words on the Sermon on the Mount. This is one of our last two sections. Christ teaches. We talked about he teaches in parable. Well, in this section, we're going to talk about sort of what the message is. And the core of Christ's teaching is found in Matthew's Gospel. We see it in this great breakup of the Sermon on the Mount. It's broken up in three parts: the Beatitudes, the perfection of the Mosaic Law, and the purity of intention. So, a thing to keep in mind, right? The Sermon on the Mount in Matthew's Gospel. Remember, Matthew's writing to a Jewish audience. Where do they receive the teaching in the Old Testament? Very key, important. Mark this up, right? Think about it. They receive the teaching on a mountain from Moses, right? Moses gives them the law of God, the Ten Commandments, right? So what do we have Matthew doing? Matthew's showing Christ on a mountain. Think of Moses, right? The new Moses, and he's giving a law, right? A new law. Old Testament, the 10 Beatitudes. Thou shalt not do this, don't do this, right? So Christ gives the Beatitudes. Blessed are you if you do this, do this, do this, right? And so you see that. Again, you see on the mountain a reference to Moses in the next part, the perfection of the Mosaic law, where Christ talks about how Moses said this. Well, originally, right, without sin, with grace, I'm calling you to do something all the more, right? To do what you originally intended to before sin. Right? And lastly, purity of intention. What's it all about? What do we intend, right? That's what the main message is. So first of all, Beatitudes. Beatitude comes from the Latin word happy, blessed. So the search for happiness is fundamental for every human being, right? We're called and we want happiness, right? We want to search for happiness. Well, so often we think happiness is found in iPad games, Xbox, PlayStation, computer games. We think happiness is found in this girl or that job or this money, right? Christ is showing here's what true happiness is found in, right? So we all search for happiness. Christ is saying, stop searching, listen. This is the way. How funny is that? How many of us know the Beatitudes? How many of us follow the Beatitudes? How many of us even think the Beatitudes are important? Think about it right now in your life, freshman year, right? What are you doing? Right? What are you doing? You want to be happy, right? Most of us don't think this is important. In other words, if we say we're Christian, we're followers of Jesus, I believe that Jesus is telling the truth. Jesus, you may be telling the truth, but it's not important to me, right? You may be saying the Beatitudes, I don't really care. I want to find happiness my own way. In other words, I don't really care about your message, God, right? Think of the original sin of Adam and Eve. What was it? God giving a law saying, follow this, right? And you'll find fulfillment. And Adam and Eve saying, I don't want to do it that way. I want to do it my own way. So think about it again. If we're not looking at the Beatitudes, if we're not following the Beatitudes, if we're not trying to understand the Beatitudes, if we're not trying to live them every single day, right now, as freshmen in high school, this very moment, kind of doing the same thing, right? Think about it. The Beatitudes are criteria for the discernment of spirits and a direction for finding the true path of holiness. So they're there to direct us into what it's all about, really and truly. It's important for us to know, to study, to meditate on the Beatitudes, then to grow in the mindset of Jesus. If we really say Jesus is God and really say that Jesus is giving us the teachings of God and really say that Jesus is important to listen to and Jesus has the words for eternal life, well then what are we doing not listening to and reflecting on and meditating on the Beatitudes? In other words, what are we doing not listening to God? What are we doing saying, God, you're not that important? Lastly, true happiness is found ultimately, what's this all about? Denying ourselves and seeking Jesus in all that we say and do. In other words, right, we think happiness is all about fulfilling and satisfying ourselves based upon what we think we want. Jesus is telling us, no, if you let go of yourself, if you love, if you serve others, if you do this, this, and this, trust me, promise you, that you're going to find your satisfaction in life. You're going to find what it's all about. You're going to be more happy than ever could be. Important, interesting. So look at the Beatitudes, and we will in class. Perfection of the Mosaic Law. Perfection of the Mosaic Law. What's this all about? Jesus tells us that Moses gave some things, but he comes to fulfill, not to abolish the law of Moses. He comes to perfect us. So he stresses the spirit of the law, which underlies the letter of the law, giving us more positive interpretation of the law. What does that mean? Right? He used the formula. You've heard it said, da 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 da, but I tell you, da 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 da. You've heard it said that that you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you, even if you look at a woman, right, in a certain way, you're committing an adultery in your heart, right? This side, you've heard it said that you can divorce, right? But I tell you from the beginning it wasn't so. That in God's original intention, man and woman are united in God, and the two become one flesh, right? And so you have this relationship between the Old Testament and the New Testament, as you're just saying. Well, purity of intention. He's saying in all this, saying it and perfecting it, he spoke of the necessity that we have a pure intention. We have a motivation not to follow Jesus' law, not to get into heaven, not to make $1,000,000, not even so that I can be happy. But Jesus says the purity of intention is that we should be motivated for the other, for God. We should be motivated not just because the law says to do this, not just because Jesus says to do this and I don't want to burn in hell, not just because I think I'm going to get lots of rewards for this, but we do it for the sake of the other, right? For the good of the other. You know what that's called? Doing something for the good of the other? It's an actual choice, and that choice is called love. Love, right, is the most purest of intention, right? To do something not because it's our job, not because we're getting paid for it, but because we want to help the other person, right? That's what love's all about. That it was Christ shows us not only his teaching and his very actions, right? He dies for us, not because it makes him better, but simply because he intends for us to have what's best for ourselves, right? And he uses hyperbole to make points, exaggerates things, that we need to be of one mind and one heart when it comes to being his disciple. So there we go, real short. Sermon on the Mount, the teaching of Christ, showing that he is the new Moses, giving the law of God, the message of God that is most perfect, that is divine, that gives us true happiness, that fulfills us, makes us perfect, and shows us how we are to live. And it's all centered around love. It's all centered around of who we're called to be, and it's all centered around God's intention from creation.